Good evening, Lou Bravo family. On this beautiful, I think it's Wednesday night, the 3rd of April, wanted to touch base with everybody here and present a presentation on really honing in on budgeting skills. I think this is a lost art, and it's also a very important one for those who have, that kind of rat race, paycheck to paycheck lifestyle. I think a lot of it can be solved with proper budgeting. So I'm going to do two videos on this. This first one's going to be more of the philosophical underpinnings of it, thinking differently, changing your mindset. Second one's going to be more tactical. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to share my screen, my entire screen. And then let's hide that because nobody wants to see that. And the outline for tonight is I want us thinking differently between how we bring money into the household. This can work for single or married folks out there as part of the family. And particularly, we'll look at a monthly budgeting example template and what goals we're going to aim for. And then I'm going to jump into the 50-30-20 rule once we get to that point. I want us to start with money and the concept of it. I'll have a whole different video on what's money and what's currency and the differences between the two. But we think too much of the income coming in as cash flow. And I want to take this a little bit differently because I want to separate the terminology between income and revenue. Because as you know, for entrepreneurs out there listening to this, revenue does not equal cash flow. Sometimes when we're receiving income, just happy to get a paycheck in, we look at that as cash flow because it comes in and it goes out, and we don't know where it goes and we don't know how to track it. Income is money received, especially on a regular basis, based on your exchange for labor. You are trading your time for a paycheck. You are renting out your skills and your time in order to get that paycheck coming in. Now, there is nothing wrong with this from a standpoint of you're going out, working hard, you developed a skill. A lot of us, pretty much all of us, have pretty much done that, and we know how to do it, and there's a comfort in it where we don't have to worry about too much except doing our job and getting paid. But I'm going to show you the difference between that and revenue, and how to move from one side of this equation to the other. Revenue is the total amount of money brought in by a company's operations measured over a set amount of time. Now, that amount of time can be monthly, can be quarterly, can be yearly, and it's usually all three if the company is tracking a decent amount of revenue, because that revenue goes to pay for everything down the line in the form of expenses. Income goes to pay for everything down the line in the form of what we call bills. I want us thinking and changing this paradigm shift here to think from left side to right side, not as income, but as revenue. And there's a reason for that because, as I said, revenue does not equal cash flow. And because revenue does not equal cash flow, you're now managing your own household like you would a business, like you would a CEO, tightening the ship, tightening the belt, putting money into strategic areas that can actually work for you, instead of just being happy with what you have and, gee, I have a couple hundred left over by the end of the month. Let me hang out with my buddies and do all the things that I normally do. Now, this also feeds into the idea of thinking as an entrepreneur. And if you want to think as an entrepreneur, I'm going to peer behind the curtain a little bit on what income really is. And I really want you to internalize this as much as possible. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with having a job and getting a paycheck if the goal is to use that to cook into something and make a play and invest wisely and strategically place it in places that can actually work for you. However, I want you to really get into this line as what a job is going to do for you. When you're earning income, trading your own time and labor for money, what you would do is produce your widgets for 2 weeks, but the company hasn't sold your widgets yet. They're still in the display case on the shelf, waiting for the customer to come by and give you their hard-earned cash. So what the company has to do is they have to give you a paycheck, because you still need one every 2 weeks or twice a month. And that paycheck is actually a loan from the company until your production for those 2 weeks gets sold and they actually make that money back. It's not a loan in the sense that you pay interest on it, but it's a loan that you, in the sense that you become almost like a drug, addicted to that payday when it comes, because you know all the time and the effort and the energy that you put in, you're finally getting rewarded for. That is income. Revenue is a little bit different. Revenue As a company, you're setting production goals monthly, weekly, and daily. Hitting those goals becomes your work. And the revenue that you generate today pays for next month's expenses. Or if you're on the income side, next month's bills. Or maybe the revenue that you generate today pays for the next 3 months of expenses. Maybe if you're doing it right, the work that you do today in April, on April 3rd, is paying for your expenses or bills for next January. And when you're thinking like this on the right side, revenue, rather than on the income side, now you're thinking of wealth in terms of time, like in months. If you're really good at it, your revenue is paying the work you're doing today, the revenue is paying for bills 3 years from now. That would be fantastic. But I want you to start thinking of wealth in the matter of time. How many months does this revenue buy me to where I don't have to work? Versus income, which is I produced for the company. I know they didn't make any money off of it yet, but I still need a paycheck because I still worked for them. Two different mindsets, left side, right side. Which one would you want to be on? Now, the difference between these two also feeds into this concept of status and classes. What are classes? Upper class, middle class, lower class, and then even they divide that into upper middle, lower middle, whatever you want to call it. I always go back to George Carlin's thought on this between upper, middle, and lower class and the poor, he actually said in his skit, probably from about 30 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Carlin said that the upper class keeps all of the money and pays none of the taxes. The middle class pays all of the taxes and does all of the work. And the lower class, the poor, they're just there to scare the shit out of the middle class, keep them going back to their jobs on a day-to-day basis and keep punching the clock. So I've always looked at the difference between classes on two things that would really come down to if we want to simplify this. You either own your home or you own your labor and the work that you do, one or the other. So you own it, home and labor, or you rent it out to somebody else. And the upper class has got a pretty good handle on that. I think we all agree. Upper class owns their own home and they also own their own labor. They're the business owners. They're the ones that we hate working on the hedge funds. They're the ones at the local butcher shop. They're the ones that own the yacht club. They're the ones that own the restaurant. These are the people that understood revenue and expenses equal profit, revenue minus expenses equal profit, went out there, fulfilled their own dreams, and are making the type of revenue to pay for the lifestyle where they would own their home and they have free time to do as they please because they have a system in place that owns a business. Lower class, I think, has no delusions of this. They're just happy to have a roof over their head and rent a home. And they also rent out their labor. They trade their time to get a paycheck twice a month to get their income. They're okay with that. And the reason why we call them middle class is if we're there or we aspire to be there, or we have been there, or maybe we've moved past there, it's because they are literally caught in the middle. The middle class will do everything they can for their status symbol to own their own home, but they rent out their labor to somebody else with a job, getting an income and a paycheck. This is the differences between the three, at least in my estimation, at least in my view. Let's start thinking differently about how we operate our household budgets and how we're bringing in money as revenue, and start thinking that way instead of it as income and cash flow. So what do modern budgets look like? Well, as I mentioned in one of my other videos, I spend considerable amount of time actually meeting with families, middle income, setting appointments, going over finances, teaching them basic finance, and then setting them up for budgets where they can find money and actually, get ahead, if nothing else. So this is, some of the people I sit down with are below this. Some of the people I sit down with are above this. But on average, I put some average numbers out there for a single family that I would meet with or a married family, sometimes with two incomes, sometimes with a married husband going to work and having his wife take care of the kids in the household. Now, this is what a modern budget looks like. Let me know if this looks familiar to how you've been thinking about it. And don't feel bad if it does, because we've all been there once. I always say, if we've been there twice, having been there once, I don't know what to tell you. But, the side of it is that it's only a mistake if you make it twice, and not learning from this mistake is the mistake on this. So here's what I see from middle America when they try to explain to me their budget and their thought process behind it. They know they have a certain amount of income that they take home. In this example, $4,000. They also know that almost half of it's going to mortgage and credit card debt and auto debt and student loans and all that other stuff. And they also know they have groceries and insurance and utilities and gas. And by the end of that, they can seriously come up with a number of what's left over, $725. So in their mind, they're thinking, all right, this month, I know I have an extra $350 I can spend on whatever on the first 2 weeks of the month, and then another $350 on whatever on the last 2 weeks of the month, because I get paid on the 1st and the 15th. That's how they're thinking. And that 725 goes quick. It goes to hanging out with their buddies, watching the football game at Buffalo Wild Wings. It goes to going out on the lake and paddleboarding and kayaking. It goes to, hey, let's grab a bite to eat. It goes, hey, let me take this girl out to dinner. Whatever the case may be, chip, 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 it just disappears. No other plan other than to know that they're going to go back to work and make some widgets. They're going to get paid, and they're going to have some money left over. This kind of thinking will steer more people broke than anything else. What does a married family budget look like on a monthly basis? Well, maybe there's a little more income coming in. Maybe there's two incomes coming in. Husband works full-time, wife works part-time, kids are being taken care of at home. Maybe the husband is going out and just doing everything he can to bring money in, so his wife can stay home with the children and take care of the household and run it full-time, because ladies, you probably know running a household is a full-time job if you've ever attempted it. So the money is a little bit higher, but the house is bigger, so it costs more, and there's more debt, and he had to finance a car so his wife can drive his kids back to tap dancing and jazz classes and soccer practice and you name it. There's more mouths to feed, so the groceries are higher. Insurance is more expensive when you have family plans. Utilities, because everybody needs the latest bleep bloop cell phone. And then obviously you're driving around more with more vehicles, so the gas is costing you more, particularly nowadays. It wasn't costing nearly as much, as we know 10 years ago, and even just 5 years ago, it didn't seem like it, but now it is. And there's an amount left over too. And their thinking is on the married family, well, I know this is much I bring in. I know this stuff has to get paid. I have a little bit left over, and that stuff goes to, there's nothing in this budget for family planning. Again, taking the kids to soccer, taking them out to ice cream, going to the movies, whatever the case may be, go to the water park, go on a family vacation. This is what I see on a nightly basis when I sit down with families and I'm going over the numbers and I'm going over the budgets. But they know mentally that they have, because they're bringing in income and it is cash flow, that they have an extra $400 to spend in the first half of the month, an extra $400 to spend in the second half of the month, and hope and pray nothing hits that they weren't expecting that makes their negative balance in their checking account, because they have to wait for that next drug to come in for that paycheck so it replenishes it, what they're doing there. Again, if you've been there, if this is what it looks like now, that's okay. I'm going to go over a couple different strategies, and one in particular that I think would help because it would at least give us goals. A lot of budgeting plans out there. A lot of them, I've used all of them. I've taught all of them. I've worked with families on all of them. The one that I steer people towards to fix their current financial situation, though, is the 50-30-20 budget rule. If you've heard of this before, that's great. If not, I'm going to explain how this works, and then we're going to do some homework on trying to get to that level so you can actually spread this out accordingly. 50-30-20 is 50% go to needs, 30% go to wants, and 20% go to savings. Now, there's some argument here on whether that savings dynamic can include the debt, or the debt should be in the 50%, which are needs, because we feel we need to pay that monthly credit card bill or that car bill, because we could get in trouble, quote unquote, if we don't. They could repossess the car, your credit score will be hit. It almost becomes, now your needs are that debt drug that you got to fill in. Or should you not be saving anything until you get that debt paid off? And that's why that 20% should go there. I'm not here to make value judgment calls on what people should do or where they should put things. Value is subjective. I've been teaching economics long enough to know that if value was objective, you wouldn't need a guy like me coming in to come in and sort some of this out. You just press a button, here's a chart, here's what's valuable, plug it into it. But because value is subjective, the needs and wants and savings are literally going to be up to you how you put the revenue that you're generating into each of these buckets. So what does the single budget and the married budget look like, comparatively speaking, to the 50-30-20 rule? This is where the homework comes in. I'm going to task everybody here to take inventory. In this case, we saw this 4,000 is brought in, 760 is left over. This guy's on the 82-18 plan because none of that's going to savings. What's remaining left over is what they think should be rewarded for working so hard for 40, 50, sometimes 60-hour weeks just to get that paycheck twice a month. That there's no plan thinking that this should be taken care of and put into separate buckets, because they're not thinking as an entrepreneur in revenue. They're thinking in middle class as income and cash flow. So there's two things that would tackle this to get those percentages moving. One, pay down debt. Two, get a side hustle where you get more revenue coming in. So even if you get to a point where an extra $500 a month or $1,000 a month could be really life-changing for this specific budget, think of the side hustle, entrepreneur, solopreneur dynamic, something to bring in extra revenue to the household that you are the CEO of. You are the CEO of your own household, bringing in revenue. This is what the 50-30-20 rule looks like. Let's see what the married budget looks like when you're taking inventory. Almost the same thing. They got 860 left over. This is the 87-13 plan. This is a perfect example of who I sit down with on a nightly basis. They're getting squeezed by taxes. They're getting squeezed by inflation. And they're probably going into more debt just to make sure that those things are met. Because again, that 860 is going to family things that are not budgeted up top. So the 87-13 rule could turn into 90-10 rule real quick. It could turn into 95-5 rule, and then it's only a matter of time. They're one blown out tire away from going under completely, taking out more loans and then putting themselves in a backward spot. We got to get out of this death spiral. Got to get out quick, family. So my goal with this on Thinking Differently is become the CEO of your own household, generating revenue. In your home at 123 Main Street in Frogs Balls, Arkansas, wherever the hell that is. Step one, generate revenue and think in terms of generating revenue. Two, budget it in the 50-30-20 format, or at least set goals to get there. If you're in that 82-18 or 87-13 and 50 seems too steep, try to aim for 65 or 60. Try to aim it steer it in a direction that could get you to this format. Or if you have a side hustle that you're bringing in an extra $1,000 a month and you can't get your regular income and paycheck to this format, just do the side hustle in the 50-30-20 format and start getting into good habits. I remember Lou talking about this a while ago with we're going to wake up one morning when XRP goes parabolic at 2:30 in the morning when we're sleeping. We're going to go from XRP wealthy to confused wealthy, because we're going to look at our portfolio and how the hell did this get here? What happens if you have 10,000 XRP tokens and it shoots up to $75 and now your portfolio says $750,000? Do you have a plan for that $750,000? Do you have goals and buckets that you can put it in? Do you have it mapped out? So, hey, when this comes in, I'm moving a third of this here, I'm moving a third of this there. Or is it just buy a Lambo and then in 3 months you can't afford the oil change? And the next thing you know, you're back into the same middle class budget thing that I just showed you here. Get the plan down in paper and move forward with it. And as my father always said, mind your fucking shop. Or Lou said, mind your fucking business. I think he had a 20-minute video on this. He said it is a duty and a responsibility of a man to bring in money to the household to take care of his family. He was 100% right on that. We have the obligation and responsibility to take care of our loved ones, but we need the tools and we need the plan to do it. I know this can happen. I have full faith and confidence in everybody who's listening to this and watching this. Part 2, I'll give you the tactical tools to do that, which I'll explain in part 2 of this video. But family, giant hugs. Onward we march.